Batman is one of the most popular fictional characters of all time. From his debut in Detective Comics issue 27 to the present day, Batman has enjoyed 86 years of existence. Batman is obviously DC's most popular character, but he didn't do it all himself. Of course, you have Robin the Boy Wonder, a character just as influential as Batman. Not to mention characters like James Gordon and Alfred Pennyworth, and overall just the Bat family as a whole, the term used to lump all of Batman's closest allies together. Two of those allies are Batwoman and Batgirl. Batwoman is of course Kate Kane, but Batgirl can range anywhere from Barbara Gordon, Cassandra Cain, or Stephanie Brown. With how famous these two mantles are, appearing in video games, movies, getting their own series and shows, or a cancelled movie that should have been released, you may be surprised to learn that the characters you see now are not the original Batwoman and Batgirl. And in this video, we will talk about the origin of the original Batwoman and Batgirl, why they were created, and ultimately how one evolved into being their own character and the other lost to time. Batman debuted in Detective Comics issue 27 on March 30th, 1939, and 11 issues later, we would see the first appearance of Richard Grayson, aka Robin. I don't think I need to give you the origin of these characters because almost everyone knows the orphan billionaire and orphaned acrobat story. These characters were monumental for the comic industry, they inspired many other creations and tropes, changed pulp culture forever, and created some of the best stories put to page. However, in the 50s, Batman and Robin's popularity began to take a sinister and controversial turn. They were gay. Or at least that's what certain people thought. Due to the colorful and weird outfits, printing mistakes, and overall homophobic-induced paranoia, parents and many others began to believe that Batman and Robin were a ploy to not only normalize gay culture, but indoctrinate people into being so. As weird and stupid as this may sound, you do have to realize this was the 50s. Around this time was the creation of the nuclear family, which of course was a mom, dad, kids, maybe a dog, who all lived in a nice cookie-cutter suburban neighborhood where their neighbors looked the exact same with the exact same family dynamic. As unfortunate as it is, this was the time, which made DC Comics rush to a solution to make sure that you knew a man wearing underwear on the outside of his pants was completely straight. In July of 1956, we got Detective Comics issue 233, which was the very first appearance of Kathy Kane, the Batwoman. Kathy Kane was a wealthy heiress and former circus acrobat. Kathy would become very interested in Gotham's own vigilante, resulting in her imitating Batman and becoming the Batwoman. This wasn't some half-hearted attempt either, with Kathy creating her own suit in Batcave as well as certain gadgets. The Batwoman would then debut soon after and completely steal the show from the dynamic duo, which of course interested Batman, who used his detective skills to quite easily figure out that not only was Kathy Kane Batwoman, but he also found where her Batcave was. Batman would then go to said Batcave and attempt to dissuade Kathy from continuing being the Batwoman, citing that criminals could also easily figure out her identity given time. So she quit. For a little while. Kathy grew bored without the action and went back to being Batwoman, earning the blessing of Batman to become part of the Bat family. Ironically, the same time this happened, Kathy and Bruce Wayne began dating, giving us the very first Batwoman and creating a female love interest for Batman to reassure readers that this man in a skin-tight suit was completely heterosexual. As a member of the Bat family, Kathy assisted on many missions, helped other heroes such as Superman, and met Batmite, who became obsessed with her romantically and tried so hard to be her sidekick. This didn't work out, but it did plant the seeds for the next major member of the team. In Batman issue 139, published April 1961, we were introduced to Kathy's niece, Elizabeth Bet Kane. In this issue, Bet would go visit and stay with her aunt, where Bet noticed that Kathy kept disappearing at night. Kathy told Bet that she was going to see a special someone, but in actuality, she was out as Batwoman. Bet would become increasingly suspicious of her aunt, while at the same time idolizing Batwoman. One night when Batwoman was fighting some crooks, she ended up getting some gold stars in her hair. The fight was then recorded and placed on the news, which Bet saw. Soon after, she used Kathy's hairbrush and some of the stars fell out, cluing Bet into her aunt's secret life. I want to repeat this real quick. Bet found out about Kathy's double life from a hairbrush. Maybe Batman was right about Kathy's identity being poorly protected. Bet decided that if her own family can be a hero, why can't she? This led to Bet creating her own costume and setting off to save Batman, Batwoman, and Robin from the Cobra Gang and declaring herself Batgirl. Later, when Kathy returned to her own Batcave, Bet revealed herself to be the Batgirl. Unfortunately, Kathy didn't want her niece to become a vigilante and went to Batman for some advice. The two decided that they would simply stall Bet with training until she gave up, leading to vigorous exercise and conditioning in the hopes that Bet would tire of it all. But she didn't. Instead, not only did she become extremely capable, but she also caught onto the act and decided to do some detective work of her own to discover the lair of the Cobra Gang. Unfortunately, even with all her training, Batgirl was caught. Yet, Bet was still pretty smart, and while she was held hostage, she made paper bats and put them through the vents, making a makeshift bat signal which alerted the others, who burst in to save the day. During this, the leader of the gang grabbed Bet and put a gun to her head, leading to Bet faking that she was about to faint and then disarming him. Bet would then admit that this was too dangerous for her, but instead, Batwoman actually encouraged her, welcoming Batgirl into the Bat family. Here, she began to have a crush on Robin, giving Richard his own long-term love interest to ensure that he was also heterosexual. But that also creates some weird complications. Mainly that Batman was currently in love with a woman whose niece was in love with his son. Thank God these relationships were not permanent and didn't go anywhere for the most part, cause it would have been a weird family tree. But speaking of said relationships, Bet and Robin's never really amounted to anything, as it was mainly one-sided, as seen in Batman issue 144, where Bet discovered that Robin's heart belonged to another lady, leading her and Batmite to attempt to get Robin to fall for Batgirl instead, only to find out that the other lady was Lady Justice. On the other side of the dynamic duo, however, Batwoman and Batman's relationship was very real, as their secret identities were dating. Batman, of course, knew Kathy was Batwoman, but Kathy did not know that Bruce Wayne was Batman, leading to hijinks and drama. I'd also like to point out that this is the exact same situation Tim Drake and Stephanie Brown would be in for years, so it truly is like father like son. Some of the strange things that happened during this era of their relationship was Batman turning into a child, so to protect his identity, he pretended like Bruce Wayne was cheating on Kathy so she wouldn't realize that he was Batman. There also began a feud between reporter Vicky Vale and Batwoman over who was the better love interest, and then some nonsense with Catman, where Kathy became Catwoman in order to take him down from the inside. The Catman incident occurred in Detective Comics issue 325 in 1964, which would be Kathy's last appearance for 13 years. And just 3 issues before that, Batgirl and Robin had to fight and release a Genie Batman, which was also Bet's last appearance for 13 years as well. After these 2 issues, the two retired from heroics and Bet actually went on to be a star tennis player. However, in her absence, another would take on the Batgirl name. 3 years after the disappearance of Bet and Kathy, Barbara Gordon debuted in Detective Comics issue 359, becoming the second Batgirl. But for many, she is thought of as the very first Batgirl. Now, there is an argument to be made that she is the first Batgirl, and that is because of a little thing called a hyphen. Bet Kane was Bat-Girl, while Barbara Gordon is Batgirl, all one word. I've had this argument made to me many times when I've made videos on Bet previously, and it's stupid. Batman used to have a hyphen in his name and then they dropped it later on, but he didn't take on a new name or new persona, he's still Batman both times. It's weird to separate the two characters in the mantle because of the hyphen. It's essentially discrediting the existence of Bet because you prefer Barbara, which is especially interesting because Barbara Gordon was never meant to replace Bet. Her iconic debut cover specifically says, "The new Batgirl," meaning that she wasn't the first and acknowledging the existence of Bet in the process. This weird erasure that has happened to Bet throughout the years is quite odd because that was never really the plan, which we see in Teen Titans issue 50. After a decade of Barbara Gordon being Batgirl, Teen Titans issue 50 marked the return of Bet Kane as Batgirl in 1977, and it was in quite an interesting way. The Teen Titans are traditionally an East Coast team, and while there, a train begins to fly, causing them to spring to action. But across the country on the West Coast, an aircraft carrier that was hosting a tennis tournament begins to do the same, flying into the air. Luckily, Batgirl was the winner of said tennis tournament and took up her costume for the first time in years to help. And she wasn't the only one, with Hawk, Beast Boy, and the Golden Eagle, whoever that is, were also nearby and helped drag the ship back down and save the day. Soon after, Lilith and Dove meet with them and they unravel a much larger plot that leads the Six to go meet the Teen Titans and try to stop it. This would essentially mark the creation of Titans West, which wouldn't actually be concretely established as an actual team in these issues, but it very much would become real in the future. This prototype Titans West marked the official return of Batgirl, and as far as I can tell, she never actually meets her successor. The closest I can get is in Batman Family issue 16, where Barbara Gordon and Richard are watching TV and they see Bet take down a criminal on it. Sadly, Barbara doesn't even make a comment on it, but it is fun that they technically were in the same issue, and that's about the extent of Bet's return. So it's only natural that we go check in on what Kathy Kane is doing. What Kathy Kane was doing was... Kathy first suited up again in Batman Family issue 10, where Batgirl went to visit Kathy Kane but had to leave when Killer Moth was causing havoc. During that battle, a villain named the Cavalier joined in the two overpowered Batgirl, forcing Kathy Kane to put on the Batwoman suit once more and save the day. Barbara and Kathy would soon meet up again, not knowing the identities of the other, but that changed when Killer Moth attacked once more and the two discovered the secret identities of the other Bat. This issue also explored changing the name of Batgirl to Batwoman, but after their adventures together, Barbara declares there is only one Batwoman, who, speaking of, actually did not come out of retirement and only helped to make sure Batgirl was okay. Kathy would show up a few more times, most notably in a team-up with Huntress from an alternate universe, but in Detective Comics issue 485, we would learn about the death of Kathy Kane. The story starts with Batman at Kathy Kane's circus, which I didn't mention this before, but after she retired, she bought a circus, which is quite funny because both her and Nightwing were former acrobats who then later bought circuses, and I just think that's neat. Batman was at Kathy's circus because he got an anonymous note saying that Kathy was in danger, and that was extremely apparent as soon as he got there. Jumping to Kathy's defense, Batman fights off the League of Assassins, and although initially successful, trouble quite literally walks in. The League's brand new recruit, the Bronze Tiger, walks into the room and begins battling Batman. A fight easily won by Tiger as he knocks out Batman in a single hit. Luckily, Bronze Tiger is an honorable fighter who acts under a strict code, so Batman is left alive. Unfortunately, Batman wakes up minutes later to a terrible scream and goes to investigate, only to find a dead Kathy Kane, clinging to her old Batwoman costume. Soon after, Ra's al Ghul emerges from the shadows to inform Batman he was the one who gave him the note and that this was not his doing, but instead the new leader of the League, the Sensei. Batman is skeptical of the villain but believes him for now, yet still refuses his help and tracks down the League himself, where he challenges them to a duel by slamming Kathy's mask down. A huge fight ensues between Batman and the Bronze Tiger, but a random member of the League shoots a poison dart at Batman, making the duel unfair and causing Bronze Tiger to leave, giving Batman a chance to give himself the antidote and take down the remaining enemies. After doing so, Batman goes back to Kathy's mask and discovers Bronze Tiger's mask is right next to hers. This was certainly a weird way to kill off such an important character, but I can understand why they did it. It was the start to a brand new story arc that they wanted to make big, plus they weren't really doing much with Kathy since she wasn't out of retirement permanently like Bet. And just like Bet, they may have been planning a brand new Batwoman, but I can't be sure about that because I wasn't alive or in the writer's room during that time. However, just because I understand why doesn't really make it good. This was a pretty bad send-off in my opinion, and a really sad way to end the life of such an important character in the Batman mythos. However, Kathy Kane had another opportunity for life just 8 years later. In 1985, DC's most famous event occurred, Crisis on Infinite Earths. This event served as a way to reboot the DC Universe and fix things that they had gotten wrong previously or change things that had become troublesome or needed a new take. So the end of this event created a new Earth, which was literally called New Earth. This brand new continuity changed a lot of things as it was the incorporation of multiple different universes into a single one. For characters like Batman, he still had plenty of the old Caped Crusader stories and tales, but was expunged of unneeded stories and lore. But some characters did not come out so unscathed, and for Kathy and Bet Kane, they were now blank slates. Kathy Kane made her New Earth debut in 1988 in The Killing Joke. But not really. Batman the Killing Joke is a really infamous story that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and in that story we see this picture, featuring Kathy and Bet suited up just like old times, and that was because this was supposed to be old times. It was intended to be outside of the brand new universe, but due to its success, it got folded into New Earth and was retroactively made canon. So while this is technically the first appearance of Batwoman in this universe, it was never meant to be, which becomes apparent when we go to the actual first appearance of Kathy in Batman issue 678 from 2008. But before we talk about that, I think we first have to discuss the mantle of Batwoman. After Kathy's death in 1977, there would officially be no more Batwoman for nearly 3 decades. The only thing that came close during that time was the aforementioned Killing Joke picture and an alternate universe in 1998 where Selina Kyle becomes Batwoman and wears Kathy's suit. However, in 2003, all of that changed. Batman Mystery of the Batwoman was a movie tie-in to the DCAU of the time, and besides being a mess that drove the Watchtower database crazy, it featured the first honest-to-God attempt at doing another Batwoman, or, spoiler alert, Batwomen. This film tried to revive the mantle of Batwoman, and in a pretty fun way. The reason that I count this as an official Batwoman piece of lineage is for 2 reasons. The first is that the DCAU has a pretty good track record of influencing the comics, especially when it comes to female characters. For example, Harley Quinn and Renee Montoya were creations of the DCAU first and were later brought into the comics, so it wouldn't be out of the question for that to happen with these 3. And the second reason is that the movie accidentally predicted the actual new Batwoman who would debut in 2006. When DC unveiled the press release for Batman Mystery of the Batwoman, they didn't have the official art of the Batwoman yet, so they went with a Batgirl silhouette with a red outline that would look rather similar to Kate Kane's suit. Catherine Kane debuted in 52 issue 7, and yes, that is the exact same name as the last Batwoman, because unlike Barbara Gordon with Bet Kane, this Batwoman was not only intended to fully replace Kathy from the timeline, but also be her. She was the daughter of Colonel Jacob Kane and Captain Gabby Kane, with her having a twin sister named Elizabeth Kane, which we will sort of touch back on later. Unfortunately, Gabby, Kate, and Elizabeth would be captured by terrorists and held hostage until a team led by Jacob tracked them down and burst in. Jacob then saved Kate, but it was too late for her mom and sister. This tragic moment would motivate Kate to join the military just like her parents and specifically be part of the Navy, where in traditional Navy fashion, she was gay. This was quite a funny change for the character considering the origin of her supposed original version, which is only enhanced by learning that she and Bruce Wayne are cousins. So those 2 factors make it seem pretty apparent that this Batwoman will not be a love interest for the Dark Knight. After being discharged from the Navy and doing some other stuff, Kate would get mugged in an alleyway, but she would actually fight off the attacker and begin beating him so bad that Batman actually stepped in to save the criminal. This moment made Kate realize that she could be a vigilante just like Batman, and so she did, giving birth to the brand new Batwoman. Despite the original intention though, this wasn't the Batwoman we've come to know and love throughout this video. And the true first appearance of the real Kathy Kane came in Batman issue 678, 2 years after Kate's debut. The reintroduction of Kathy Kane is quite an interesting one because it had to deal with some hurdles set up by Kate's appearance, while still sticking to the original formula, which resulted in Catherine Webb Kane. Catherine Webb was a very creative person, being a poet, film director, and many other things by age 25, but she would settle down when she met a man named Nathaniel Kane, a rich Gotham socialite who professed his love to Kathy by buying her a circus. The 2 were married and lived quite happily for 7 years until his sudden death at the hands of a stroke. Soon after, Kathy was approached by a secret organization known as Spiral. Spiral is DC's main spy agency, with its goal typically to find out the secret identity of superheroes, which was just the plan for Kathy, as her mission was to discover the secret identity of the Batman. This then turned into the origin we know and love, where Kathy began training and became the Batwoman, forcing Batman to track her down, and then they began a relationship. Just like the old comics, Batman, despite being in love with her, still would not reveal his secret identity, yet knew Kathy was Batwoman. This, plus the fact Kathy had now genuinely fallen in love with Batman, forced Kathy to quit Spiral. Yet this didn't quite work out, and Spiral actually forced her to quit being Batwoman. This is very interesting because, as previously established, Kate and Bruce are cousins, so Kathy didn't have the Kane name originally and instead married into it, making the Batman love aspect morally better, but still a little weird. So there's already some major differences, but something that stayed the same was how she died. Kathy was still killed by the League of Assassins at her circus, but unlike the original death, this one was faked, which was exposed when Kate Kane Batwoman investigated the scene of the crime. It was then revealed Kathy faked her death in order to become a Spiral agent again and fight against a rival spy organization. It was also revealed that she had a bit of a romance with an Argentinian superhero named El Guacho, who was a member of Batman Inc. Kathy's final appearance featured her revealing herself, shooting Talia al Ghul, and telling Batman this would be their final time meeting before disappearing once more. That wraps up Kathy's story, or stories, in the New Earth continuity. Despite the amount of changes, Kathy was still relatively true to her former self in the end, and even got to stay as the original Batwoman, something that could not be said for Bet Kane. Mary Elizabeth Kane debuted far before both versions of Catherine in 1989, but the way she debuted was quite interesting. Bet first appeared in Secret Origins Annual Issue 3, and if you don't know about the Secret Origins series, it's essentially ways to catch up or recap the origins of certain characters, teams, or important moments in the history of DC, with this issue specifically recapping the origin and major stories of the Teen Titans up to this point. This issue also served to explain what is and isn't canon from the former universe, or modify former aspects of the older universe to make it fit better. Because this issue went over all the major moments, this included the origin of the Titans West, but there were a few key differences, with the most important one being Flamebird. Instead of Bet Kane being Batgirl like she was originally, she was instead the Robin-obsessed Flamebird. She now had a huge crush on the boy Wonder and had never met him before, leaving quite a few questions to how exactly Bet Kane became this new vigilante if not for her aunt. We would then get these answers in various different DC character encyclopedias, but as far as I can tell, was never actually confirmed inside the official pages of an actual comic, besides these blurbs, which were just mini versions of encyclopedia entries. The New Earth origin for Bet Kane was that she was an all-around star, being a beauty pageant queen, star tennis athlete, and Olympic gymnast as well as swimmer. Bet was simply the best around, and nothing would keep her down. Or at least it seemed like it. Bet was actually very bored with her life after becoming a famed tennis player, as she seemed to have done everything that interested her, and she needed a new challenge. Luckily, she found a challenge in the form of Robin. Bet had always had a crush on the boy Wonder, and considering that she had nothing else to do, she decided to put together a costume and meet Robin herself as the hero Flamebird. Unfortunately, even her heroics didn't catch the attention of Robin, and she became bored with being a hero, ultimately retiring as well. Later, we get to the origin of the Titans West, as we previously discussed, and it's mostly the same, but now Bet was Flamebird and had a huge crush on Robin. This was also the first time she would ever officially meet Robin, but unfortunately the connection wasn't there, and to make matters worse, Titans West would disband shortly after. For the rest of the New Earth universe, Bet would basically become a supporting character for the Titans, even getting on the main team a few times, but nearly every time that happened, it was short-lived for various reasons. The last thing Bet did during her time in this universe would move to Gotham to study at Gotham University, and while there, catch up with her cousin Kate, aka Batwoman, but the redhead one, not the secret agent. This is a really fun era of Bet and Kate, and it really seemed like it was setting up for Flamebird to be Batwoman's sidekick, homaging the original Kathy and Bet. A major moment in the series even has Bet going to Kate and revealing that she is Flamebird. But before the story could fully continue, something terrible happened. Before we move on entirely though, I do want to highlight a few things about Bet that I thought was interesting. Starting with the elephant in the room. His name is Gary, he's very polite, and he knows how to skateboard. Unfortunately, behind Gary is something not so great. So, some of you may have pieced it together, but Bet is cousins with Kate Kane, who is cousins with Bruce Wayne, whose adoptive son is Richard Grayson, aka the first Robin. Now, Bet had a huge crush on Robin, which was completely fine as of the time period these books came out. But when Kate was introduced, it retconned that the Kanes and Waynes were related, turning this innocent crush into an awkward conversation. With that out of the way, we can now talk about the other stuff which is entirely related to the Flamebird change. During her time as Flamebird, Bet had 2 costumes, and as charming as the first one is, the second suit is so much better. It is really beautiful, and to be completely honest, might be in the top 10 superhero suits for me. I always love open hair masks, which are only complicated by the greatness of the goggles and the fact that the mask makes sort of an almost bat symbol. The cape and top of the boots look like they are on fire, which is really good, and the circle utility belt really complements the overall suit as it breaks up the top and bottom of her suit in such a natural way. Genuinely, I love this suit so much, and I find it funny that she also still uses batarangs. Of course, they aren't actual batarangs, but they are so similar, just like how Nightwing has wingdings, which are actually pretty much the same as Bet's weapon, depending on the design. And speaking of Nightwing, that takes me to the final point. Flamebird's name makes no sense in universe. Let me explain. My favorite superhero is Nightwing, and the way he got that name was through Superman. While Richard was still Robin, Superman told him the story of a Kryptonian hero named Nightwing. And he was the moral paragon of superheroes, the absolute best of the best. But like the rest of the Kryptonians, he died when the planet exploded. Inspired by the story, Richard would later ditch the Robin identity and become a new hero, taking the name Nightwing to honor the fallen hero. However, Nightwing wasn't Krypton's only hero, and he in fact had a sidekick, and that sidekick's name was Flamebird. With this knowledge, it creates a pretty fun comparison that both the original Robin and original Batgirl would go on to be the heroes Nightwing and Flamebird. But in the New Earth continuity, not only was she never Batgirl to begin with, she would have never heard that story. Bat did not meet Superman until after she became Flamebird, and she became Flamebird before Robin became Nightwing. So it's not like she just came up with the name on her own. It is possible, but highly unlikely. She doesn't have fire gadgets, there's no tragic fire-based backstory or phobia, she doesn't have red hair to maybe connect to the name. It is just a completely random name. And honestly, I think that's very funny. Comics are stupid and it's great. Keep it up. That is all for the New Earth versions of Bet and Kathy Kane, but if there's one thing DC loves, it's a universe reset. This time done when Flash went back and saved his mother, accidentally causing everything to go to shit. This was a classic butterfly effect situation where Barry never got his powers, Batman was now Thomas Wayne as Bruce was the one shot in the alleyway, Superman was never discovered, and Aquaman was at war with Wonder Woman. Flash would then go back and try to fix things, but comics are never that simple, and he ended up resetting the universe and creating Prime Earth, the current main DC universe. This resulted in a lot of major changes, as it wasn't a full-hearted reset, but instead an attempt to revamp the old universe to make it cooler. And as we all know, big corporations know exactly what is and isn't cool. This did not go exactly that well, but did give us just a little more content to really pad out this video so I can get some more ads. Or at least I would if I was monetized. Still not there yet. For the final time, we will start with the new history of Kathy Kane. And this is where I have to put an asterisk. See, although we got Kathy in 2008, her story wouldn't really unfold until 2011, which was right around the time DC was doing the reboot. So the history I talked about previously, and the one I'm going to talk about, is quite hard to distinguish from each other, but I did my best to split it up to what I think fits best for this video. This Kathy has the exact same story as New Earth, being a member of Spiral and trying to infiltrate Batman's inner circle, then faking her death to control Spiral only to reveal herself to shoot Talia and then disappear. But now, instead of being Catherine Webb, the wonderfully creative woman who married into the Kane family, she is now Catherine Netz, the artificially created daughter of Otto Netz, who was the true leader of Spiral and also a Nazi. They don't hide it. They don't try to just hint that maybe he was alive during the war. He was just straight up a Nazi. Kathy also had a sister named Elizabeth Netz, who is once again a reference to Bet, but I wish she wasn't because wow, like father, like daughter. Spiral would collapse later and Damien would kill Otto Netz. So good on him. But bad on Kathy because she attempted to bring him back to life. Kathy would then realize that her dad maybe wasn't a great person, but by the time she did, it was too late and her father electrocuted her and then threw her off a moving train into water, where she hasn't been seen from again, so it is assumed that she's probably dead. The New Earth story was certainly strange, but I could bear it. However, that combined with whatever this is just makes it a complete character assassination, which is incredibly strange, something that only gets stranger when we get to Bet. Bet, like Kathy, still retained most of her New Earth history with the small little detail of her still being Batgirl. This just completely falls apart as the changes made to Kathy make retaining Bet's origin insanely stupid because Kathy didn't have time to train Bet to be a hero and certainly wouldn't now as she was the fake daughter of a dude who was buddy-buddy with a certain someone. It's not explained how Bet was still Batgirl, so I'm gonna fill in the blanks here and just say that the New Earth origin is her current one, but instead of Flamebird she was Batgirl as a better way to get Robin's attention. And then after she realized they weren't meant to be, she switched to Flamebird, or maybe she was told the story with Richard and then switched to Flamebird around the time he made the change to Nightwing. Just really anything along those lines because wow, New 52 really made some changes. Though one change it did make was actually incredible and is something I wanted from the New Earth version. Bet made her official Prime Earth debut in Batwoman issue 1, and she would be a supporting character all the way until issue 32, with the overall series only lasting 40 issues. So Bet would be a major part of this series, and that was because she became Kate's partner. This is wonderful, but also really backfires on me. In a real monkey's paw situation, Bet and Kate became partners, but Bet was no longer allowed to be Flamebird. Kate decided to go full military on her cousin by burning the Flamebird suit and giving her this terrible uniform, renaming Flamebird to Pleb and teaching her how to be a hero. This just sucked as Bet was a hero beforehand, but not in the way Kate wanted, so the two trained with Bet giving a lot of pushback until Kate deemed she wasn't ready. This angered Bet to the point where she got a spare of her Flamebird costume and went out to prove herself, but sadly went up against too strong of a threat and was hospitalized. Bet would remain in a coma for quite some time until issue 17, where Bet suits up once more, but now as the hero, Hawkfire. And man, this sucks. The costume isn't as good as Flamebird, and the name just makes zero sense. At least Flamebird had the out-of-universe explanation, but Hawkfire just has nothing. It's just Flamebird, but backwards, and now specifically a hawk, which is also weird because she knows a hero named Hawk, and I didn't mention it before, but she and Hawk briefly dated, so it's really weird that half her name is just her ex's. Truly one of the biggest downgrades I've seen in a while. Going forward, Bet's status quo was partner of Batwoman as most of her appearances involve Kate, and on the rare occasion it didn't, it was for a Teen Titans event. However, Bet would actually go back to the Flamebird identity quite recently as she returned to it in DC's Legion of Bloom in 2023, which was also a mini Titans West reunion as she, Dove, and Bumblebee teamed up to save Hawk from the treacherous Queen Bee. It was a pretty fun story, but I don't have much to say about it. And that is all there is for the main universe history of the original Batwoman and the original Batgirl. Of course, there are some alternate universes we could talk about, and as tempted as I am to talk about the Scooby-Doo crossover they had, I think this is where we're going to end the video. I also should mention that comics are not the most consistent medium out there, so some of the things presented in this video may not be 100% accurate or up to date. For example, I said New Earth Bet wasn't Batgirl, because when she was first introduced into the New Earth universe, she was not intended to be. However, through a throwaway line in a Young Justice comic and the first proper appearance of Kathy in the New Earth universe, we know that Bet was. But these weren't major moments or the original attention at the time. The main point of this is to tell you to just understand that as much research and care as I put into this and all my other videos, they will never be be the most accurate because a single line or image in a comic I could never read could completely mess it up. So I only presented what I deemed was the major points for these characters. It is super interesting how these characters evolved through the years, and specifically how one of them became this hero who is still active today, becoming a super round character with an interesting history, and the other got fucked over. Maybe one day we'll see the return of a true iteration of Kathy Kane, but until then, I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Make sure to support your local comic store, like and subscribe, and be on the lookout for more videos as I've got a lot planned right now, so we're gonna see if I have enough motivation to actually do anything about that.